and welcome to the Qubit Guy podcast, brought to you by Classiq, the quantum algorithm design company. My name is Yuval, and my guest today is Oscar Diez, head of the quantum computing sector at the European Commission. Oscar and I talk about funding opportunities for quantum, the comparison between Europe, the US, and China, the challenge of commercializing world-class research, and much more. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please let us know how we did by emailing hello@classiq.io. That's hello@classiq.io. Hello, Oscar, and thanks for joining me today.
Hello, and thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So, who are you and what do you do?
Okay, so my name is Oscar Diez, and I'm working as a head of quantum computing at the European Commission here we are based in Luxembourg, but we have also a lot of people in working in the Commission in Brussels. And the name says the name of the sector. Basically, we are part of the unit HPC and quantum computing. It says quantum computing, but in reality, it's quantum technology. So we are dealing not only with quantum computing, but also other quantum technologies like quantum communication, quantum sensing and metrology, and quantum simulation and basic science in quantum.
So, if I remember correctly, the EC is sort of the executive part of the EU. And what does the EC do in terms of quantum computing or quantum communication and so on? What is the goal of the body that you're heading?
So we are mainly there are different things that, as you said, is the EC is basically the executive body of the EU, and there are different things. One of the main things that we are doing is basically funding. So basically, we have different funding programs, especially for research, and this is where quantum is. We are mainly focused the actions in quantum in that part in research. Also, lately we created a fund, also a funding program for infrastructure. So basically, it's for buying infrastructure. Like for example, in our unit, as I said before, is HPC and quantum computing, and we bought we were still buying the supercomputers for Europe that basically are used by researchers. So we are doing mainly is in research and deployment of infrastructure. In our case, there are different things. Like for example, we can talk if you want about we are starting to create a quantum fund for financing basically the startups on quantum in Europe. And later there are some, but we are not directly doing that. We can do also there can be legislation that we can provide a proposal for legislation. Like for example, for a good example is artificial intelligence. You probably heard.
So the research funding, I assume, is targeted primarily at the universities and corporate researchers. Is that okay? Is that correct?
So it's I will say it's quite open. So we have and if you see basically on the funding opportunities when we publish calls, one of the things that we ask not only for universities and research centers but also for SMEs. And other organizations. So it's not only it's true that mainly most of the projects are focused on universities and research centers. That is where it's most of the research is happening. But we try to have the industry as involved as much as possible. And in most of our projects, you can see that it's maybe I will say 20, 30, up to 40% of industry also or private partners.
If you can tell me how much money was allocated to these programs, I think there was about 1 billion euro in 2018, but maybe there have been other allocations since. And if you're willing to share, how much has been already committed and spent?
So I don't have all the figures here. I can tell you in a kind of a high level. So you are right. It's basically the committee for the quantum flagship. That is the name that we provided to the basically to this funding for quantum, for research in quantum. It was around 1 billion, and we have spent, I think we did one set of calls in 2018, and we are running now another set of calls. Normally it's every 2-3 years that we do calls, and we are preparing, for example, the funding for then for the program for the 23-20 work program 23-24. We have spent around, I think, if I'm not wrong, 30-40% of that 1 billion, and of course all these things change, and it's normally we do it in the framework programs are normally 7 years long, but in this case it was part of the previous of the 20, so of the previous framework program for research that is called H2020, and we are getting also part from the current program that is Horizon Europe.
The European Union is made of many member states. How do you ensure equity, both in terms of access to funding, but also in terms of the outcome? So if the EU has a quantum computer or several quantum computers, is there a way to assure that even the smaller member nations, have access to it?
So yes, basically there is, from the point of view of accessing to the funding, it's all the calls are open to all the EU member states, and normally we have also associated countries. So from that point of view, all the everybody, and we request most of the calls. We request that at least we need to have three. So at least three of the partners needs to be from different countries. So we need to have three different countries. It's up to the basically the the countries or the partners to decide who they would like to, because it depends on the type of on the program, it depends on the type of call. But they decided. The only thing is that we request is three, that at least there are three minimum is three different countries. And later we have in some calls, for example, quantum is one of the what we have is we request also some participants from what we call widening countries. So it's basically countries where let's say like for example Malta, there are some countries that they don't have all the level of research and infrastructure level. They don't have the same investment that big countries like Germany, and that also we ask the participation of these countries also. That's from the point of view of access to funding. Later, from the access to, for example, system, a good example it will be with the quantum computing or the supercomputers. It's open to all the basically what we do is we open also calls to researchers. The researchers they provide, normally there are people from university or research centers, can be from one or multiple, and they provide the proposals, and normally there is an evaluation committee that it will decide. It's true that there is no, they take into account also the participation of the different countries, and normally they have access to countries where normally this, for example, widening countries where this will not be so easy for them to have access to this type of computers.
In terms of technology blocks, I think a lot of countries, a lot of continents have decided that quantum is a strategic technology and is really important to be able to have mastery and access to it. And obviously, in the EU, there are programs such the programs you run, and then there's funding from individual countries. I mean, I think that Germany has significant German funding, and France and others. But the EU is often compared to the US, where there's federal funding, and also to China, where there's also centralized funding. What is your opinion on how does the EU stand in relative to the US and China in this race for quantum um, quantum supremacy or quantum advantage or just high level quantum technology?
Sorry if I understood. So you're talking from the point of view of the funding, or
Or the results. I mean, I think the funding is more or less public information, at least in the US and in
yes.
the EU. Um, how would you say that the EU is doing relative to US and China in this sort of new space race?
That's it's a difficult question. So I will not call it an issue, but I think one of the challenges that we have it's the fact that we have actions that are done are coordinated at European level, and also we have you have seen that, for example, Germany or more recently France, they announced their own program. So we have contact with these countries in order to be in line and to try to cooperate as much as possible. So both between the different countries and also with the EU. A good example of this cooperation is, for example, the project EuroQCI. But regarding how the results, how are these compared to other big countries? I think that Europe it's has been always a very a big player in quantum. I think it's one of the big players. I think we have very good research here. I think what is one of the issues that we are seeing, and I think it's not new, it's not only in quantum in Europe, is that in order to move from research basically to market, this kind of jump, it's we were not basically we could improve in that area, and that is something that we are trying to solve, but it's not easy. It's basically say you have these small companies or startups that the access to, for example, to capital is not as easy as, for example, in the States, and that it's clear and it's something that we have seen. So I think we need to work on that area. But I think from the research point of view and also from the results on what we are trying, what we are achieving until now, I think maybe we are not in the news so often as, for example, big companies like IBM. But I think there is very good research in Europe, and there are very good achievements.
And I certainly agree with you on the research side. There are fantastic research institutions in Europe, and we at Classiq are collaborating with some of them, such as Fraunhofer Institute in Germany. But sometimes it looks like transitioning to commercialization is, as you said, could be improved. And we may have seen it both on cloud providers, where most of the cloud providers are US based. We've seen it recently, unfortunately, on Corona response, where I think the sort of vaccine development and production also some questions. So how does the EU think about if the problems are clear or the things that need to be improved are clear? Who's
I can
coordinating the solution? Is it the EC? Is that locally?
so first, I cannot provide you an answer for all this. So I'm talking, and this is, as I said before, this is my personal view. So maybe it's not. I'm not trying to say that this all the. This is basically the easy point of view. But going a little bit more in detail in or more concrete into quantum technologies, we know that there is an issue. We know so we have done recently a study where we were reviewing these topics. We were reviewing what are the key difference with other markets, like, for example, the US, and what are some of the solutions. So we know that there is an issue. We are working at EU level and also in coordination with the EU member states. And as I said, one of the things that we are doing in order to solve that is the creation of a quantum fund. Basically to facilitate. So there are different actions on that area, especially on quantum. This is one of them, but so we know that there is an issue and we are trying to sort it out. But it's not easy to change. It's also a change of mentality also from the point of view of providing funding and basically having a different risk aversion that is not something that you will change from one day to the other.
Absolutely. Now, earlier in the conversation, you mentioned that even though the section is called quantum computing, there's a focus on quantum security and quantum sensing and quantum communications. Do you have an estimate of how the rough percentages? Is it equally divided? Is it 60% on quantum sensing and everything else for the others? Can you give us any sense of how the budget is divided?
So I don't know in top of my head. I will say that it's currently more, so it will be a higher percentage for quantum computing, obviously, because it's getting probably more momentum. And also quantum communication in our side, because we are working very we are working in the basically in the creation, as I said before, of the Europe UCI, that is basically a quantum communication infrastructure for Europe. So that will be the two main, basically the most of the budget at this stage is going there, but there is still quite a, I will not say, I will say maybe uh, this will be like maybe 30 between 30 and 40% each, and the rest will be divided between the quantum simulation and quantum sensing and metrology, and including also there the basic science. But we are still funding. I think we are still there's still a lot of potential in we believe in basic science, and we're still funding very low, what we call low TRL calls. And also in quantum sensing and metrology, one of the things that we have seen is that is one of the more at this stage is one of the more advanced from the point of view that is closer to market. So we are still heavily funding those areas from the research point of view.
We are recording this podcast towards the end of January 2022. Are there any open calls that you would like to draw our listeners' attention to, something that they should look up and perhaps consider submitting a proposal?
Yes, it's in fact we are now. They are all the Horizon Europe. The calls. Basically, the only thing is they are closing in. I think it's at the end of February, so they still have time. We have calls in quantum computing, in different types of quantum computing, and basically in more high what we call high TRL, so quantum computers and low TRL quantum computers. We have also calls in I need to one moment. Let me in quantum communication. We have calls in basic science. So there are quite a lot of calls also in sensing and metrology, quantum simulation. So they are currently open. They will close soon in February, as I said. And there are also a set of calls that are closing in February, but probably will be extended until March. That is more on the deployment of infrastructure. And this is more on the quantum communication infrastructure. So there are different calls there for deploying a quantum communication infrastructure at national level, and also the coordination for the implementation at European level.
So where should people go if they want to learn more information? How do they reach out to you? Do they go to a particular website? What's the best way?
The best way I will say is the the Quantum Classiq website, that is QT. This is from quantumtechnologies.eu, European Union. So qt.eu. And also, if they want more in detail on the calls, they can go to the what we call European Participant Portal, and there they can search for quantum, and they will see all the calls there. But if they go to qt.eu, they will find all the information, including also the research strategic agenda. That is a kind of it's a PDF document where they have all the agenda for the next years on what we are doing in quantum. It's a very important document.
Oscar, I appreciate you providing us with all this information as well as your personal viewpoint, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much.